In the few months since the release of Apex Legends, the game has experienced not only a meteoric rise, but also a bit of a fall. It appears to have lost its momentum and stagnated. Funnily enough, this video has been in the works for quite some time. The majority of my points were laid out months ago, actually, but the fact I've been able to come back to it all this time later and really have nothing of substance to add is kind of a testament to that stagnation. If there's anything worth mentioning regarding the growth of Apex post-launch, it's that it hasn't really grown much. It's added a new character, a gun, and a really shitty battle pass, but ultimately it's being completely outpaced by its competition in regards to post-launch content and keeping players engaged. But does that mean it's a bad game? Does that mean it's doomed to disappear into obscurity? Not at all. And having had quite some time to reflect on it, I'd like to share with you my thoughts. And we'll start with the gameplay. The overall feel of a Respawn game is there, the responsiveness, the fluidity, just the way the game plays, it's very comfortable. And despite a lot of the enhanced mobility maneuvers from Respawn's other series, Titanfall, being absent, you're still a lot more mobile than you might think at first glance. For instance, one of the things that did carry over from Respawn's previous game is the slide, and it's still, in my opinion, the best slide in gaming. It just has the right amount of momentum, carries you just the right distance, and has a lot of subtleties that make it very comfortable and applicable across a variety of situations. For instance, you can cue it. By jumping in the air and pressing the crouch button, you will enter a slide upon hitting the ground, which is great, especially on consoles, because it allows you to cue it up and very quickly begin planning your other actions. You can preemptively start looking in other directions. You can aim and be ready to fire immediately. And in a lot of games that have similar mechanics, you want to have those cool moments where you go into a slide and blast away at someone, get this awesome feeling, but due to configurations, it just isn't practical. You gotta hold the button down and then quickly try to aim, and by the time you start shooting, your slide's already done and you're kind of just sitting there crouching and moving really slowly. And honestly, it's just done really well here. This does allow for those moments and more. Use it on an incline or slope to continue your slide indefinitely, and that can be used to build momentum, which you can then use to spring yourself forward and extend your jumps. And this is a feature that was also in Titanfall 2, but due to Apex Legends lacking all those other abilities, you see it being used much more prominently here, not only because there are less options available, but because it is encouraged in the map design as well. In addition, the game gives you surprising vertical mobility. You may not be able to run along walls, but you can kind of run up them. Similar to Hanzo and Genji from Overwatch, if you hold the jump button on a wall, you will do this little scurry to the top, and I was surprised by just how high it let you reach. And this allows you to take advantage of a lot of the verticality in these play spaces, and it gives the game a much broader sense of freedom that isn't available in some of the games you might immediately compare it to, except for maybe Fortnite, where you can kind of just build stairs. Regardless, Apex Legends does a lot to still feel distinct from other games that on a surface level kind of look a lot like it. It separates itself with its momentum, the slide that we discussed at length, and the versatility of its application both in combat and mobility. Maneuvers like extending your jumps. Then the climbing mechanic, which makes you much more vertically capable and allows you to take advantage of more opportunities in the environment. Then you couple this with a lot of the options present in the map itself, and you have a very distinct and unique feeling game based on its own merits. And we'll talk about some of those map elements a bit later, but I do want to bring up a couple of negatives I noticed. I mentioned this game has sharp, responsive controls, but I also noticed some sluggishness and a bit of clunkiness based on Respawn's own past standards. For instance, I talked about how great the sliding was, and it is, but it's not as intuitive as it used to be. There is a split-second delay after activating sprinting, where if you try to slide too soon, you'll just sit there and crouch. This didn't happen in Titanfall 2. You could activate it immediately, and that's very frustrating when you have the reflexes to make a quick-second decision and try to perform an evasive maneuver, and the game does the opposite. There is a small window of time where the difference is you quickly moving and evading away versus you staying where you are and crouching down like a sitting duck. This happened a lot, and it's not a matter of it not being Titanfall, it's just not good in its own right. It's a frustrating quirk with no visible indicator that I'm aware of that lets you know when the game's going to shit on you and make you crouch instead of perform a slide. And so they can either A, make it immediate, or if their goal is to intentionally slow it down a bit, they could, and I can't believe I'm saying this, take a page out of Halo 5 sprinting, where it too has a startup but gives you a visual indicator upon reaching the velocity that you can use your abilities. In addition, I noticed what seems to be an intentional decision to slow down the climbing animations a bit, and while I might understand the intention to rein players in, I don't know if slowing down the climbing improves the experience, so I don't think they needed to do that. They could speed them up just a hair care, but it's not bad if it remains the way it is. So now let's discuss arguably the most defining aspect of this game, one of its biggest contributions to the Battle Royale format, and that is its emphasis on teamwork and squad play. And I realize other BRs have had an option to play as a team. In Apex Legends, it is currently your only option. The game is built around it and is emphasized most obviously by its heroes here known as legends. Each character has a passive, an active ability, and a super that charges up over time. For example, Wraith, the character I spent the most of my time with, has a passive where she can sense other enemies aiming at her and even has the option to warn teammates. Her special ability is a phase walk, which was also in Titanfall 2, and this lets you temporarily disappear into another dimension. And her super is to create portals that teleport you to and from one another that other people can use as well. I won't go through every legend in the game, but I think the balance between them is pretty decent. Not perfect, but not bad enough for me to feel like there is a must-pick character for your squad. And that kind of leads into my first issue that I had with the game at first. To me, the legends didn't seem impactful enough to justify such a strict team-focused experience. Yes, they have distinct abilities that offer advantages, and there are absolutely characters with team-oriented abilities like Lifeline, which can heal your squad very effectively, or Pathfinder, which can create zip lines for your less mobile teammates to use. So in isolation, I felt like they were fine, but for this game to promote team play as a defining feature, for it to go so far as to only support squads of 3 with no doubles or solo modes allowed at launch, staple features from other BRs, I didn't feel like the legends did enough to justify that. The dynamics, the synergies and anti-synergies between them never screamed to me, oh, they just wouldn't work without teammates. Some might be worse, but they certainly weren't impactful enough to justify designing this game around squad play the way they have. That's what I thought at first, but the more I played, the more I realized that the squad play of Apex Legends was about more than just the legends. Not that they don't play their part, but they're just a smaller piece of the greater puzzle. And that brings us to the ping or tagging system. Another one of those things I just initially didn't understand. They emphasized it and mapped it to the right bumper by default, and I remember thinking, why would they devote such an important button to a feature with this functionality, at least on console? Well, this is why officially giving your impressions after minimal time with a game is a horrible idea. Now I don't have to make an I was wrong about Apex Legends video because I kept playing and come to find out the pinging system is genius. It's so much more robust and deep than you would have ever expected upon first glance. You can do the simple stuff. On a surface level, it's a lot like what you've seen before. You can ping locations, you can mark enemies, etc., but it goes so much deeper than that. The contextual interaction this feature has and the way it coincides with the game's UI to relay information is remarkable. You can ping a weapon. It will notify everyone in the game that I found that specific weapon, which will then appear on everyone's HUD. And if someone wants it, they can ping the icon that pops up to call dibs, and it will stay on their HUD until they pick it up. And this works with more than just weapons. It works with equipment, armor, ammo, etc. But the game goes a step further. You can ping objects you discover throughout the environment. If you see an enemy but lose line of sight on them and can't mark them, you can double tap the ping button to let your squad know you saw somebody. It works in the menus as well. When you are looting another player's crate, you can tag items inside, or you can even use it in your own inventory. Click on your gun and you'll notify your squad that you need that type of ammo. The degree of utility that is packed into such a simple, easy to use feature is beyond impressive to me, and it's one of the game's many innovations that lends itself to the squad-based gameplay Apex Legends is going for. Not only because it is a valuable communication tool when you have a full squad that's talking to each other, but the level of detailed non-verbal communication it makes possible is so high that it makes playing with people you don't even know who don't even talk not only possible, but surprisingly effective. I've won countless games in solo queues and was shocked by how great the tagging system was in those instances. So now we have the legends, and we also have these robust communication features. How else does Apex Legends innovate the Battle Royale genre and further emphasize this squad-focused experience? Again, lots of little things. It introduces a feature called the Jump Master, where everyone through use of the pinging system suggests a location to land. The Jump Master then chooses when to go and controls all of the players. This encourages everyone to land together and stay together at the start while still allowing them to separate to cover more ground. And as a side note, Mirage can actually duplicate himself during the drop to make it seem like an area has more people in it. On a smaller scale, you have items like the Knockdown Shield, which is a pickup you can find of varying degrees of rarity that allows you to protect yourself when you get knocked down. This, of course, is the type of item only possible with teammates because without them, you don't don't get knocked down, you just die. So even item pickups in the game are built around the idea of having people with you, but by far, one of the biggest innovations in this regard that is really a big innovation for BR games in general is the respawn system. Let me just say this is yet another one of those things that I initially saw and thought, that's not a big deal. It seems kind of gimmicky, didn't pay much attention to it, didn't see its potential. Once more in practice, as I came to understand it and see its application in action, it's going to be hard to play Battle Royale games without it, which is fitting considering Fortnite is now also doing a similar mechanic. It is executed perfectly, and I cannot tell you all enough just how much it adds to the game. Just to give a brief overview of how it works, whenever you die, your squad has a window of time to recover your banner from your dropped crate. Once that has been recovered, either of your teammates can take that to a respawn depot to bring you back. However, you start from scratch with no loot or armor and either have to get back to your stuff or find new stuff. Sounds simple, but this creates a surprising amount of dynamics. The most obvious being that death isn't the end anymore. You can be brought back. Before, if you died in a Battle Royale game, you just have to sit there and wait while your buddies ran around trying to survive, and let's be honest, when that happened, you kind of secretly wanted them to die at that point. And a lot of times, if you're good enough friends, they'll just start being overly aggressive to try and end it quicker, or will just quit outright so you can all start playing together again. Now that isn't the case. Even after you get knocked out, you're still rooting for your team. You're still invested in the match. In addition, a downed player creates this really compelling point of tension, almost like a dynamic objective within an encounter, where you're not just fighting other players, but you're trying to pick up your squad mate's banner before the time runs out. And the other team can use that to their advantage, where they can defend it, force you to come to them, use it as bait, etc. I really underestimated how much the existence of this mechanic would change the game, or how often you'd even be able to actually revive someone. Turns out its existence in the game matters almost every single match, if not by directly reviving someone, then by its influence and how it changes your decision making. When you lose a teammate in a fight, you are now encouraged to stay in that fight even though you're a man down. It promotes aggression and forces action, or else you'll lose them for good. If you win by either taking out the enemy squad or just grabbing the tag and getting out of there, great, you most likely had a really badass moment and now everyone gets to keep playing together. But if you go in and die, then that's still okay, because you'll just go to the next game and everyone will be alive again. It almost completely eliminates that situation where you're just sitting there waiting for your squad to finish their game, because between successfully reviving you or them dying in an attempt to do so, the scenario where neither of those things happen and your squad not only lives but fails to recover your tag in time, that seems to be the rarest occurrence of the three. There's really three states you can be in now. You can be active and combat ready, and then you can be down but not out, where an enemy has to decide if they want to take the time to finish you or refocus on other threats at the risk of you being picked up. A dynamic that is made more interesting due to the knockdown shield I mentioned earlier. And then there's the state where a player is actually dead and needs their banner picked up, and even then, you need to be aware of them and conscious of the team that is most likely going to try and grab it. It leads to emergent gameplay. The respawn system encourages you to develop on-the-fly strategies regardless of which side you find yourself on, whether you're trying to bring someone back or stop it from happening. It's fantastic. So, to put it concisely, the respawn system is great not just because of its surface level use of reviving players, but because of the dynamics it creates and the player behaviors it encourages. So when you put it all together, you really start to see the complete puzzle. And it makes a lot of sense why they would launch with only the option to play with a squad, because so many of the game's innovations revolve around squad mechanics. The communication system, the jump master feature, the respawn system, none of these things work without other players alongside you. So if the game launched with a solo mode, people would miss all of this. However, as time has passed, I think it's time. The honeymoon period is over. I think people get it. Player retention is down, and the 3-player limit seems like just that at this point, a limitation, and I think the game should consider expanding its team composition settings. So now let's reconsider a previous point, the Legends, where I said they aren't impactful enough to justify the strict focus on team play. Well, when you take everything else into consideration, now they're basically exactly how you'd want them to be. The game is actually better off because there's no hard counters or seemingly overpowered synergies. There's no time you're going to run up on an enemy squad and go, oh no, they have such and such, we don't have anything to deal with that. No, instead they offer light advantages and distinct options and do promote squad play to some degree, but are still singularly viable. I'd say squad composition, while important, isn't as impactful as a typical hero shooter, not even close, and that's perfectly fine, because the soul of the game is promoted in so many other ways, and when Respawn undoubtedly offers an option to play solo, it will work fine with the Legends because all of them are still viable on their own. Apex Legends is a collection of a bunch of really smart individual things that come together to create a compelling experience. It does a lot more to innovate than what you might initially think. It's not just another BR game, and honestly, its squad mechanics aren't the only way it differentiates itself. The way it handles its sandbox and time to kill promotes a distinct playstyle from its contemporaries. Respawn treads a fine line of making players have a lot of survivability while still making most weapons feel useful and impactful, minus the Mozambique. Someone put that piece of shit in the game as a joke. But other than that, you can pick up most guns and feel like you have a fighting chance. Now, there's a few interesting decisions that really change how you go about playing the game. First is the combination of maneuverability and survivability. You can load up on quite a bit of health and tank a lot of damage and or move quickly to escape danger. This combines with projectile-based weapons which make hitting targets at range more difficult. Then you have the addition of always having teammates and having a lot of life in your down but not out state. Basically, ranged encounters are not nearly as effective when dealing with an enemy team. Even if you manage to down someone at range, if they can make it to cover, they'll get picked up almost every time. This promotes a more aggressive playstyle. You usually want to get in close when getting in a fight. Shotguns are incredibly sought after in this game. I honestly feel a little naked if I don't have a Peacekeeper in my back pocket. Too bad it got nerfed and they lowered the drop rate. And you'd think that automatics would dominate the game because of this, but I found almost the opposite to be true. Automatic weapons have shallow magazines, and that in conjunction with larger health pools make them less dominant without upgrades. You can't just go in like you're playing Call of Duty. Chances are you won't even be able to down a player before you have to reload, but this isn't bad. It creates a sort of dance. Attempting to isolate encounters, getting in as much damage as you can when you can get it, relocating, climbing around, outmaneuvering them, down them before they can heal up, relocate again, refocus on another player. It's hectic. And you can take some hits throughout this process, of course, yourself. Automatic weapons can be good, sure, but shotguns and semi-autos are also incredibly useful and promote skill-based gunplay. It's kind of hard to explain. It's a loop you just need to feel out for yourself, but it is very satisfying once it clicks for you, and it feels distinct to Apex Legends because of its sandbox and health model. I don't think it's perfect. Balance is pretty good, but I do think there is some room to tweak things here and there, because while I like the longer kill times and those dynamics I just mentioned that arise from it, sometimes it feels maybe a bit too much. And even if you can manage to get them low on health, there are a lot of efficient ways to heal back up, meaning it can drag out certain encounters and also feel a bit like hitting your head against the wall if a player with max armor has a power position and you just can't do enough damage at range to kill them before they retreat or heal. And if you're not as well equipped, it could feel almost impossible to make a push and take them out, even if you get the jump on them and land multiple clean shots. But again, it goes back to that dance and coordinating with your team to deal with difficult situations like that. Last thing I want to talk about is the map design. I found it to be phenomenal, and yet another way Apex separates itself from the pack. A traditional BR map has locations and then large spaces in between. Apex is much more condensed. Name locations are a stone's throw away from each other, and even the spaces in between often have names and distinct characteristics. It feels like much less real estate is wasted, and that also ties into the more intimate combat that is encouraged. The player count is smaller, but so is the map. It's much more dense and more articulately designed, and that also rings true on a specific level. Each location feels more meaningful than just a place with a higher volume of loot. While that's also often true, these locations have clearly been meticulously designed to offer distinct gameplay opportunities. These areas are places you want to fight in, and each offers a different flavor of gameplay. Skulltown is densely populated with buildings to search and rooftops to jump across. Bridges is a fantastic vertical space with a dueling sides dynamic. Relay has a space isolated from the rest of the area, only accessible via ziplines. Oh yes, by the way, there's ziplines. I talked earlier about the movement of Apex and the options available to the player via base mechanics, but Respawn also incorporates movement mechanics into the map design itself. Ziplines are both vertically and horizontally incorporated into the design of these spaces. There's also plenty of slopes to take advantage of the sliding mechanic and the momentum that creates. Another great feature is the redeploy balloons, which are select ziplines you can take straight up that put you into freefall mode when you reach the top. This is a great mechanic not only for fun encounters, but it's an ingenious way of moving you throughout the map without needing something like vehicles. There are just so many things this game does that it's almost overwhelming to talk about. Its squad-based gameplay, its intricate map design, its distinct gameplay loop, all of these combine with the innovations it sprinkles throughout to create something much greater than the sum of its parts. And there's absolutely nothing stopping you from playing it. Now, you can't talk about a free-to-play game without discussing monetization, and yes, of course, that's here. Personally, I don't have an issue with it in a free-to-play model, so I'm not offended by it in this circumstance, but yes, there are Overwatch-esque loot boxes. If I'm just being honest though, they don't suck because they're intrusive. In fact, they just kind of suck in general. There's nothing really good in them, and that's kind of pitiful, and the battle pass they added isn't much better. The skins aren't even that great, it's just a bunch of junk. As the primary method of making money, it's concerning because I honestly find it hard to believe someone would actually pay for any of this stuff, but hey, maybe that's just my personal taste. Chances are, if you fork over any real cash, it will be for the legends that are locked. That's EA's best chance of getting you to fork over some money. I haven't myself. I personally got attached to Wraith and didn't care too much about unlocking the paid legends. I was content to just save up and buy them with the in-game currency, but it definitely feels designed to encourage you to buy them, and while that sucks, I never like to see that practice. I can't be too mad because it's a free-to-play game, and in my opinion, it's a really good one that has given me tons of value without spending a penny. So that's Apex Legends. Forget who's publishing it, forget the fact that it's a trend, because it's a damn good game. Even over 2 months after launch, I still feel that way, and although it's certainly not been the Fortnite killer many were declaring it to be after it blew up and dominated the scene for a little bit there, it's still got a lot to like, and I don't believe its decline means it no longer has hope. I believe with better post-launch support and some new features, it can stabilize and build back up again. Maybe not all the way to the top, but certainly to a point where it remains a healthy game for years to come. Apex Legends was kind of like my worst nightmare. One of my favorite franchises stripped away of everything that defined it by a publisher that consistently ruins every good thing it touches in a crowded, trendy genre with a free-to-play model. And yet it being free-to-play is why so many people even gave it a try in the first place, why tens of millions were able to experience it firsthand. It didn't have a long marketing campaign, didn't try to sell you on it, it knew it was going to be controversial, so it just dropped and said play it for yourself. And I'm glad I did. Apex Legends is phenomenal. It's not Titanfall, but it's something special in its own right. It's something Respawn can be proud of, and with the right support, it can be a big game for years to come. Because it's not just another Battle Royale game. It's arguably the best one. Till next time.